Hello, my name is Emily Beynon and today I'm going to talk about breathing. This is the second video about breathing on my channel and I would suggest watching part 1 first before watching this one. I'll put a link up here to take you to that video. In this video I'm going to talk about posture, the cycle of in and out, usage, different types of breath and finally when and where to breathe. So let's start with a reminder about posture. The rib cage goes all around the torso and we need to keep this as relaxed and flexible as possible so that it can take in the maximum amount of air. So always think up and open whenever you're breathing in. Relaxed and neutral position so that we can make our rib cage as flexible and open as possible to fully fill with air. Shoulders back and relaxed, throat open and jaw in a nice neutral and relaxed position. Now think of the motion of air. We can only blow properly when we can breathe properly, and we can only breathe properly when we can blow properly. So generally I like to think of the air as being in a continuous circular motion. But experiment with how your body reacts if you take a deep breath, then wait a few seconds before blowing out. And similarly, what happens after you've blown out all your air and you wait a few seconds before breathing in again? This might be a nice extra breathing awareness exercise to add to your daily breathing practice. What do you experience in your body? When you wait a few seconds before blowing out, your body has more chance to take up the extra oxygen it needs in the presence of adrenaline, the fight or flight hormone. So this might be a nice exercise to do without the flute before going on stage, for example. By waiting a few seconds after you've blown out all your air, you might find that the next breath is much deeper and more intense. Have a go and see how it feels for you. Now, in the first breathing video, I offered you some of my favourite breathing exercises. But today I'm going to share this super simple exercise to practice how you actually make effective use of the air which you've already taken in. Using a stopwatch, simply play a note and time how long you can hold it. Play it as softly as you can and keep a completely steady tone. Don't worry about vibrato for this exercise. If you do this every day, you'll find that you really get to know your body and will soon find ways of using the air you have more and more efficiently. It will do wonders for your control of soft playing, and playing a different note each day, you'll also learn which notes are easier to control because they have a more natural resistance and which notes are a little more difficult. You might find you can get to 30 or 40 seconds, or you might even get to a minute. Try it 2 or 3 times a day on the same note, but just make sure that you take a good rest and let your breath get back to normal between each subsequent attempt. And don't forget to make a note of which note you played and how long you held it to keep a good track of your progress. So now let's get back to breathing, not blowing. Not every breath we take will be the same. There might be more, but I think that there are at least 6 different types of breath. Firstly, the preparation breath. As the name suggests, this is the breath that you take at the beginning of a piece or when you have plenty of bars rest before the beginning of a new section or between movements. In the orchestra, I quite often take these breaths through my nose. It takes more time, but I feel as if the air goes in naturally slower and lower this way. And I will usually take 2 or 3 breaths before the air I'm actually going to use for the phrase. For the beginning of Debussy's L'après-midi d'un faune, I will probably be taking 4 or 5 of these low, slow breaths through my nose as the conductor walks onto the stage to take the applause. In an orchestral audition, when you have time for one of these breaths, do make sure that you put your flute down, away from your face. In addition to having extra time on your side for the process of breathing, that will also encourage you to keep your arms and shoulders relaxed, thereby helping your next breath. The musical breath. These are the breaths that our colleagues, violin players and pianists take. The phrasing or the music comes to a natural full stop, or perhaps in a longer phrase, a comma. And they're the breaths that the music and the listener needs too. Take your time for these breaths and make sure that the word relax goes through your mind so we don't get any unpleasant breathing sounds from a tense throat. The supermarket breath. Yes, I did say supermarkets. And what I mean is, yesterday I went to the supermarket and I bought apples, cheese, bread, rice and milk. So what I'm doing is taking a tiny breath on each comma to help separate the words and to make the text easier to follow. In the Daphnis solo, I use this breath for the repeated Bs 4 and 5 bars after figure 177. The next kind of breath is the secret flute player's breath. Now, from time to time as a flute player, we have to breathe when we would really rather not. And in that case, the most important thing is that we don't advertise this breath. So keep absolutely still and make sure that your throat is as relaxed as possible so that the phrase isn't disturbed by a loud gasping sound. Now, I find these breaths particularly helpful to practice standing with my back against the wall so that I'm in no way tempted to duck down or stick my bottom out or bend my knees. The wallpaper breath. Now, I don't know whether you've ever tried wallpapering, and truth be told, I haven't, but I'm sure we can imagine certain aspects of wallpapering aesthetics. Let us imagine for a moment that our wallpaper has a big design on it. Now, even if we can't push two pieces of wallpaper exactly together, we must make sure that the design matches up on either side of the gap. In flute playing terms, what I'm referring to, of course, is that the sound and vibrato either side of the breath match. In the opening phrase of L'après-midi d'un faune, I very often take a breath in the second bar, and then it's vitally important that the sound and vibrato after the breath exactly matches the sound and vibrato before the breath. The gap will be there as I take the breath, but if I manage to match the sounds on either side, it will be far less noticeable for the listener. Circular breathing. Now, here I have a guilty confession to make. I have never got around to learning how to circular breathe, or circular blow, as it should probably be called. But I know that there are many videos out there explaining how this works, so I'll leave that one to the experts. So now let's talk about when and where to breathe. As a rule of thumb, I usually like to breathe in the low part of the flute and the low part of a phrase. Take a look at this example from the Mahler 9 solo. And here I would breathe after the C sharp, even though it means breaking that slur. Now, it seems almost too obvious to say, but I'll say it anyway. Starting the note in the right place is very important, and sometimes that means cutting the note before it's short to be able to breathe and not be late. Here's an example from another Mahler excerpt, this time Das Lied von der Erde. And here I would cut the long F short so as to not be late on the low C. Now, I've already mentioned the repeated notes in the Daphnis solo, and here I would literally breathe 3 times between these low Bs to top up my air and to give them the clear definition they need. Little and often can be a very useful rule for breathing. The Dvorak 8 solo and the Bach Domine Deus from the B minor Mass are both good examples of where little and often works well. This is actually a really useful skill to have in the orchestra, so practice this way of breathing in your daily scales, breathing little and often, and see how long you can go without stopping for a big proper breath. From time to time you can get away with missing out a note if you're careful. There are 2 that I mentioned in the Mendelssohn Scherzo as possible emergencies, the G in the 3rd bar of Q and the low D in the 9th bar of Q. And there's one in the Hindemith Symphonic Metamorphosis which I sometimes leave out too, the 2nd B flat 2 bars before the end. And speaking of the Hindemith, this solo has 2 good examples of rushing to make up time. The first one is in the 5th bar of C, where breathing between the F octaves takes a little time, so I play the next 3 notes as a triplet. so as to be on time for the next quaver or eighth note in the bar together with the horn. Similarly, 2 bars later, this time after the F octave, I rushed the low F B flat so as to be on time with the clarinet on the second quaver or eighth note. By the way, these are both good examples of breathing in the low part of the instrument too. And 2 final tips to leave you with. Always listen to the sound of your breath. Aim for a low, open sound which will be proof that your throat is open and relaxed. And finally, and this might be a little controversial, but I find that lifting my tongue to breathe helps me sometimes. Try it, it might feel good for you too. I hope you've enjoyed this. See you next time.